Hey, what is up, Moto Buddies? This is Mike from Taco Moto Co. and Baja Taco Tours. I want to take you on a little tour around our very recently raced Mint 400 bike. This was this year, the 2020 Mint 400. This was the second time this bike has done that race. This is owned by my buddy Dustin. This is a 15,500 EXCF. And over the years of working on this bike and doing mods on it, we've turned it into a pretty streamlined desert bike. We've taken this to Mexico once or twice, and he and I are kind of idiots when we go out riding, and we will ride these big bikes the way guys would ride trials bikes, or like say a 252 stroke. So we put these in all kinds of situations that a bike like this does not belong in, and we do stuff that kind of tears them up. You can see from the general overall condition of this bike that it is function only, no fashion. We don't on this particular bike, he's not interested in doing anything that is cosmetic or to spiff it up. It's just all about survivability and function. So let's look at what a well-used bike, kind of becomes without any of that cosmetic stuff, and getting beat up in races in Baja and lots of desert single track and rough riding. Back here, I just put this in. So he had trashed his taillight, looped it out, and then had broken that. And because of a lot of change outs and fender mods, I have quite a few leftover stock lights. So we just threw that back in there. We kind of like the idea of having that hacksawed light. So if you notice, this has just been cut with a saw, probably a Sawzall, or I don't know what I did to chop that off. No signals, that's what your hands are for. There are options for a proper streamlined rear fender, but we just like the idea of having this thing be kind of commando style. Let's drop down to this tire, take a look at the chunks missing on this. This is the IRC MB5 tire. We did the Mint 400 on this tire, and then he's got some good general desert shredding on this, and you can see how the lugs get ripped off pretty easily after a while with our hard pack. So this is what happens when you just open it up on the very wicked, hard, aggressive, like caliche type rocks and terrain that we have out here. Other tires will chunk less. We probably don't have to beat these tires up quite as badly as we do, so there's that. And then it's a great tire. It's a buzzsaw. It's a hill climb ripper. This tire is really great, and even though it is chunking, and you would think it's kind of a crappy tire, I would disagree and say it does a really good job, and I'm okay with losing some of those chunks just based on its traction, aggression, and performance. In the comments, if you have other tires that you think are fairly comparable to this that have a little bit better durability, I'm interested in hearing what you might have to say about that. So we run Moose in this tire, and I noticed that we did not balance out the rim lock. So rim lock over there, that's a Motion Pro rim lock. It's a little fatter and lighter than the stock, but for whatever reason, maybe they've fallen off. We usually will weight the rims, especially on Moose, because what happens on the Moose is every time this side hits the ground with the weight, then it's gonna just slightly extra compress that part of the tire versus everywhere else. And so over time, just that thing rolling and rolling and rolling, it will begin to overwear that one spot. And if that Moose were to fail, it's very likely going to happen right over there. And if nothing else, you just accentuate the fact that the rim is not only out of balance, but now you've just got a different, kind of a squish rate here in that section. It just makes the tire feel lumpy as you bop down the road. And just to put some light on the fact that this Moose goes on the road, I ride a lot of road with Moose. I just keep my speeds in check. I'm riding 55, 65 miles an hour, and that's about it. I don't want to go any faster on a dirt bike with a high center of gravity with knobby tires on it. That's kind of ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. And we gear these kind of low. We've got 1440, 1448, I think, on this one. So it's not geared for top speed. I just rode a 2020 500 the other day, EXCF, 109 miles an hour with stock gearing. This thing, it wants to come apart at about 75. So 65, 55, 65 is the sweet spot. And you can ride a Moose at that kind of speed, no problem at all, as long as the temps are not extremely hot. The road is not, Vegas, 140 degrees Fahrenheit kind of temperatures. You can ride a good ways, get a lot of mileage out of a moose. So so there's that as far as moose go. What's he got here? A tusk, little discard shark fin, pretty smashed up. But you see all these gouges in there. Those are gouges that the disc otherwise would have had. And these are really a nice upgrade, because another thing to consider is the fact that rocks are continually pummeling this, not from being scraped as you go by them, but the front tire is kicking up stones, and those are coming back and whacking into that. Oh, look, that's loose, so we'll have to tighten that up. I'm glad I made this video. Another thing to put on the fix list. So stones and pebbles are continually being just sort of shot at that, and that thing is going to deflect all those away for the most part, keep those from hitting the edge of the rotor. So he's got some nice oversized Fastway foot pegs on there. Those give a lot of grip to the boots, and then just more comfort for long in the saddle and standing rides. We threw a Recluse. This is it's not the CX, I almost said CX, it's the 3.1, which is the standard clutch. It's using the Recluse drive plates, but the stock friction plates. And just a quick, disregard it. That's on the CX. I was going to mention something there. As far as the smog goes, as you know, these 12 through 19 bikes all have two emission systems. They have the vapor recovery, and that's this little button right here. On the kit that we have, we either give you the plug or a bolt, and depending on how good of a mechanic you think you are, you could either take that brass fitting out, unthread that from the head, and then put the bolt and copper washer in, or if you don't want to fool with that and risk having that brass break off the barb, you could just put the plug over it. Either one is good. If you have the plug, check that once a year or so, just to make sure that the rubber is still pliable and it hasn't cracked, because if you had a crack in that rubber, this one's good, this one's only about a year old. If you had a crack in that, you'd have a pretty significant vacuum leak that would cause all kinds of problems. Notice that the solenoid here for the vapor recovery system is intact. Just threw some plugs on there to keep dirt out of that. Left it intact so that we didn't set the check engine light. No trouble codes on this. This is still running the US EPA map. Haven't done anything there. We do have a JD jetting tuner on this, and it does a very good job of cleaning up the fueling, especially since we have a ProMoto billet end cap on here. We'll talk about that in a second. So left that intact just because of laziness, not throwing on a vapor recovery dongle. Just left the solenoid in there, and then this plug is where the SAS pump, the air injection pump, used to be. Notice that we left the thermostat on there. Huge myth that guys have about getting the thermostat off these fuel injected bikes to help them run cooler. Fueling helps these bikes run cooler. A Recluse helps them run cooler. Opening up the exhaust gets them to run cooler. The cooling system is more than sufficient on these bikes. And so you would think that guys who live in Las Vegas and ride here and in Baja, Mexico would pull our thermostats off, and yet we don't. Every injected bike that I own has a thermostat on it, and that is by design. And we'll have a video coming out soon that's going to debunk a lot of the myths surrounding cooling systems and thermostats. And so just pointing that out on this particular bike. Notice how the salt water in Baja has sort of etched off that finish. There were a couple of years of these pipes on the bikes where they just didn't have a very good finish. 15, 16, I think the 17 plus is whatever manufacturer or whatever coating system they were using, it wasn't really great. And so you get a little salt water on here and it would kind of discolor, and we don't give a crap. But just note that if you're gonna run your bike in the ocean, you're gonna get some discoloring on a few of those 12 through 16 year bikes. Let's see, molecule skid plate. This is awesome. These plates are fantastic. By far my favorite skid plate, really. Super light, indestructible. It's got some kind of, I don't know, NASA plastic thing going in here. They're just really, really good. You can't break them, and good coverage. They almost get all over here on the side of the engine case, and we like them a lot. Up here on the radiators, we threw on the Enduro Engineering guards, and the reason I pick the Enduro Engineering often is because it's a full coverage guard. So notice how the bracket here supports the lateral weight against the frame. This thing goes down and secures into the radiator bracket bolts. But notice how the side wall of this, or the side coverage component, goes around here, back to the back, and then up and fully around on the inside. So obviously you're not going to do anything that's going to damage or hit the inside, but what that is a structural member that supports the impact weight of anything you would hit in the front. And so all of this is the guard. All of this that you see here is the guard. And unlike some radiator guards, which will give you really good front protection and then kind of end some here at the halfway point or so, you hope that the universe is your friend, and if you go down and you take a rock on the side, that it will impact in the contact zone, which would, you know, sort of represent the front to about halfway of the radiator, and then you've got this exposed part back here. So you hope that the universe doesn't serve you up an unlucky day and your rock hits back here on this unprotected side and dents the radiator. So we've got some favorite radiator guards. Like, I love the Bulletproof Designs guards. So they look unfreaking believable. They're amazing. And we put those on a ton of bikes. And then these two are also a very good option. There's no aesthetics with this. That's maybe the one, I've heard that complaint a lot as far as these enduro engineering guards go. They don't look good because you're either using the stock plastic air vents or you get some orange ones. There's a few guys out there that have kind of upgraded air vents, side vents, or you could get the enduro engineering face plate guard. It's got holes in it, round holes. We didn't opt for that just for maybe cost savings on this bike. We just went with the stock. So they don't look, you know, super good compared to some of those others, but arguably they may have in some crash situations a little better coverage. So there's sort of the explainer of why we chose to do that. On the coolant, I think we've changed the coolant here once or twice on this bike. And right now, what I probably have in there is the pink coolant from an auto parts store. You know, the Euro type coolant, that's probably what's in there now. As far as oil, I run the Golden Spectro 2050. So since we're running super high temps through Mexico, lots of sustained RPMs, lots of hill climbs, lots of, you know, strain and stress on that engine, we run a full synthetic, and I'm really partial to the Golden Spectro oils. If you know the history of Golden, they go back when Penton was importing KTMs to the US as under his brand and not KTM's. So Spectro has been around for a long time and has been involved with KTM for a long time. They're not the supported oil. KTM bought MotorX and partnered with them, and so that's the recommended brand. But I really like the Spectro full synthetic 4-stroke off-road oil in the higher grade. It's exceptional. The clutch plates of the Recluse do really good with that, and that's a proper true MA oil, unlike some other oils out there. Be aware of whether or not it has a legit true MA certification. You can check the JASO website for the listing to find out if your oil really is MA rated or not. And all the Spectro oils, motorcycle oils, are. Up here on the handlebars, we've got those Acerbis grips, not the grips, but just these bar guards. And I forget which model this is. These are like the classic, everybody has seen these forever. These have been around forever. The advantages is they're easy to source parts. You can replace through the Acerbis catalog all these individual components if you lose something or break it. I think the only downside to these guards is the strength is not quite there for extreme use, and as you can see, it gets bent in when you take some hard diggers, and so you lose that straight. This should be out straight here, and then the angle should be somewhere out in here. And then the shields are not super big, and so when we're in Mexico, you don't get a whole lot of hand protection. But what these do have going for them is they're ubiquitous. You can get them everywhere, and they're fairly light, and they do a good job. There are better options out there, but these are just fine for, I think, the price point and the weight. And so for whatever reason, we've got these on the bike, and I don't know that we'll change them until they get too, you know, we'll just keep running these and they'll get uglier and uglier, and that's fine. As far as the grips go, we use the Pro Grip 714s. I like these a lot. There's a couple of reasons. Is they're very, very spongy. They offer really nice sort of impact and vibration dampening. They widen out here in the center, and that's a unique feature to these grips. Not many grips that I can think of do that. And we typically run safety wire around here. We put these on with spray paint. The glue under here is spray paint. And these have been on a long time, and they look really good. And Dustin also has bigger meat paws. He's kind of a bigger dude. I think he's like over 6 feet tall. So that's why we run these for him, because they've just got a little larger diameter. Oh, and you know, speaking of height, so back here to the foot pegs we talked about, notice that we have these set. So the Pro Motos are one of the only foot pegs out there, the Air version, let you flip this little spacer around, so you could move the pegs up or down, and we have them in the low position. And then also with his height, we have a seat concepts on here, and this is the tall version. This is way taller than the stock seat was, very, very tall, and that's just to get his legs from being too bent, so he's not sort of riding like a kid's bicycle. And the seat concepts are really nice. This is the standard. There's two versions. There's comfort and standard in terms of like the width, and the width of this mimics the stock seat very well. The comfort version of this seat is wider here in the butt section, and then they have an extra large version which is even wider. We don't use those on our off-road bikes because when you stand, your legs are going to be at this, whatever angle as you lean back, as your sort of leg position changes on the bike, and as you move your leg back to maybe get your butt back further over the rear fender, that bulge out there, for the comfort bulge, for the XL version, not the comfort version, but for the XL version, the bulge that comes out here contacts the inside of your legs and can be, it can either just kind of bugs me anyway, or it prevents you from getting as far back as you really want to. So while it's a great seat, and I recommend it for guys who like to sit a lot, I stand a lot, so does Dustin. So we either opt for the standard version, which is what that is, or I like the comfort version, which is just a bit wider but does not interfere at all. Okay, so just maybe dropping back here, we talked about the Pro Motobil end cap on this. So I really like the performance of the stock KTM mufflers. We've got FMFs, 4.1s on a few bikes, and depending on how you ride them, it may lend itself to the power delivery of a certain pipe. And I think the power delivery of this bike, what we're after, is something that gives us really smooth, linear, low-end power, builds moderately, and then has a nice top end. We don't spend a lot of time in the upper throttle ranges. This is not a supermoto bike, and we're not flat tracking it. This is purely a desert bike and a single track bike. So for those reasons, the stock muffler does a good job. The resonator's intact, and we're using the Pro Motobil end cap with the spark arrestor in. And we didn't do a good job sealing it, and I didn't put the gasket, the green gasket that comes off the stock end cap on there, so you can see some of the carbon is sort of blowing out from the blow by, and then the bolt's missing, and you could care less. All right, and again, look at the condition of these plastics. The whole bottom section's broken off, and nobody cares. All right, up front, as far as the front tire goes, Shinko 216. This is not the fatty version. This is the 90. I think this has been on longer before the fatty came out. Next time we put a front tire on this, we'll do a fatty. And this has, this only has the one mint on it and then some desert riding. So no, I'm wrong. We did have the fatty. I guess I probably didn't have one in stock, and so I just threw this on, which is why, but I would have preferred the fatty. And you can see the wear here. I'm not sure how many miles this has on it, but comparing that to the rear tire, you can see that this bike gets a lot of aggressive throttle action on it. A couple of things to point out. We do not run a rim lock in the front. I don't ever run, when I run a Moose, I don't bother with the rim lock in the front. And so then I use these, I think these are DRC little rim plugs, these little rubber nipples that go on the inside, and they plug up where the air and the rim lock used to be. And then see all this grease that's coming out? You've got some over there. Let's see if we can see it better on the sunny side. You know, it's funny, there isn't any over there, but hopefully you can see that well enough. That grease that's coming out is very normal and typical for a Moose. We lube that up really, really good. I use silicone on all my Mooses. I do not use Murphy's soap. That is a water-based vegetable oil type product, and it will dry out and potentially wash out. We spent a lot of time in water crossings, and water getting in there will dilute that and potentially, wash that out. So we only exclusively use silicone. I use silicone oil, silicone grease. We get it either like as Michelin lube or any of the Moose manufacturers will send you a little tube of silicone grease, and I use that exclusively, nothing else. And it has the downside of coming out, and that's okay. It's, you know, it is what it is. And that stuff will spray up, this grease will kind of throw itself out, and we'll get, you know, you'll get little greasy spots around the underside of the fender and on the engine down there in the skid plate, and we could care less. It's purely about the function. Up here on the headlight, we threw on the XL Sport, got that from Chris at Moto Minded, and why we like these is they're adjustable. You can just reach down there and tweak that. They have a pretty good range. That's pretty tight, you know, with all the high-speed vibrations, we didn't want that to loosen up, so that's secured in there pretty good. But otherwise, if you loosen that a tiny bit, you get good movement out of that. Notice that this bike has a newer fender. So this is the Polysport fender, and you can add this to the I think it'd be the 14 and older bikes with a little adapter plate, because as you know, the triple clamp changed, and instead of 4 bolts underneath, which is the newer style like this bike, the older style has 2 in the front and 2 on the bottom. And Polysport, they make a little adapter plate that we use a lot to upgrade the front fender. And I've got some like 05 525s that have the new style. This is the 17 plus through current front fender and mask, and those old 525s look great upgraded with that fender and headlight setup, look really cool. So we did that to this bike also because the Moto Minded light, you have to run a 17 and up mask, and so we just did that because you needed to. And then on the turn signals, these are our custom in-house Takomoto fork wrap 360 front turn signals, and they do a really cool job, and we've got those set up for running light feature, stock multifunction switch, GPR V4. We've had a couple of leaks out of this one, and I've sent it back, and Howie over at GPR always rebuilds this for us for free, and so that's pretty cool. But I like to figure out what it is on a couple of these that have been leaking, and there might be something that we're doing, or maybe they've updated some of the seals or something, and that might be worth looking into on our side. We've got the Motion Pro fork bleeders here. Let's see if you hear any air. Nope, I think I bled that the other day. I think the fork and I think this bike has been sprung, if I remember right. I think we've changed the spring rate because he's a bigger dude, but the valving is stock. And then we've played around with oil. I know I've changed the oil in there a few times, and I think I've got kind of a custom blend oil in there. I'm not sure what weight it is. I have it in my notes. Notice that I always like the Skf Fork Scrapers. Run those on a lot of our bikes because when we're down in Mexico, we'll be getting a lot of this clay type mud and some of the areas where we're either by the ocean or if it's had any rain down there. And that mud is very aggressive and tends to eat out and attack seals, and so we just run those and they do a really good job. Nothing else has really changed up here on the front. I know on this side, let's see, we've got the Dirt Tricks front, that's a 14, and then the counter sprocket, I'm sorry, the dome washers, the upgraded dome washer, that's better than the stock one, which fails and causes some problems from time to time. We've changed this chain out. We did that before the race. Recluse slave cylinder right there. You can see the classic condition of a bike that's not been washed. Just not any oil leaks, but you just see some of the areas where oil kind of weeps out, and right in here, especially where the wires from the stator and the exciter come out. I don't think we've ever had the stator cover off on this bike, but you'll see that very common classical oil weeping going on there. No big deal, happens to all of them. We use a stock air filter, PC Racing air filter gasket, and then I use PC Racing filter skins on all our bikes. So that's what's going on in there. Attributes. I think the size of that tank is the 3.4. Comment if you think I misquoted that. And then we've, let's see, last time I had the bike, I replaced the fuel filter inside the tank. And so that's basically it as far as this bike goes, and I would take this bike to Mexico anytime. There's nothing that needed to be worked out, improved on this. I don't think there's anything I'd really want to upgrade or change beyond what we have here. It's very serviceable. This is just a really good, solid bike for obviously for doing races. 2 Mint 400s on this machine, and we've not done any repairs to speak of as far as anything in the engine, the clutch, all of that solid, no issues. I don't think this bike's ever broken down or had really any significant problems to think of at all. But just super reliable machine. The 12 through 15 is a great generation. The 16 is a good one too. Any of that generation of bike has a ton of aftermarket support. Lots of accessories and goodies you can get for those. A little broader than the 17 through 19s. Yet to be seen what kind of support the 20s pluses are going to get. So that's it. That's the wrap up of the Dustin's Mint 400 Baja desert bike. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this or any of the other things we ever talk about. And as always, go out, get some adventure.